We may be seated. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's conversation. I'm Professor Darlene Miller of the Thabo Mbeki School. Today we want to welcome our honored guests, the patron and Chancellor, former President Thabo Mbeki, our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Pulling Lenkabula, Acting Vice Principal, Teaching and Learning, Engaged Scholarship, and Student Support, Professor UNISA, Acting Vice Principal, Strategy, Risk and Advisory Services, Masadiso Molapo, Dr. Masadiso Molapo, Acting Executive Dean, our very own Professor Edith Baswana, Directors of the TM School, Professors of the TM School, the Diplomatic Corps, and all invited guests. You are most welcome today. We've had a wonderful turnout today. It's taken us quite a while to get everybody in, so we apologize for the delay. And may we just give ourselves a warm round of applause to welcome us. The Thabo Mbeki School is a premier graduate school. We advance the public sector education in public and international affairs. We're about 5 to 6 years old now. We were launched in September 2020. And I love repeatedly reading what I like to say Tata Mbeki, someone close to the heart. I like to quote what he says on our school's mission statement. The purpose of education was to learn to question everything. And this conversation is one of the most exciting things that actually happens in this country. How many politicians give you 4 hours in a day to ask any question you like, where they don't simply just speak at you, but listen to what you have to say and what your questions are? The first time I saw this conversation, I was quite astounded. And they said, "He's how old again?" No, can't be true. So this is a very, very special opportunity, and we are extremely grateful, Tata, that you make this time. The other quote that I love, to produce men and women who are both critical and creative, unquote. So our school has different focus areas. We have international and diplomacy studies, citizenship studies, peace and conflict studies. Can we adjust the mic? There's a lot of hissing on the mic, please. Public leadership studies, security and intelligence, simulations and futuristic affairs, the study of government affairs, sustainable livelihoods and resources management, urban and rural affairs. Through our work, we hope to think and learn critically and be creative about development challenges in this country. And we also have a high-level research program that tackles public and international affairs. One of the terms that Thabo Mbeki uses sometimes is citizen science. Our job is not just to sit at the university and to write books and articles. Our school is a genuine engagement with society so that we can learn and that we can advance and deal with our development challenges. It's a transdisciplinary school. That's important. We're different to others. We're not accounting or business leadership. We are across the different disciplines. So it's quite a special initiative in that way. And we encourage you to take advantage of our informal programs that we have, the diploma courses, and the more formal postgraduate courses at postgraduate level. So at this point, I would like to call on our Acting Executive Dean, Professor Edith Paswana, to talk to us about the overview and purpose of the day. Welcome, Prof. Paswana. Can we give her a round of applause?
Thank you, Program Director, Professor Darlene Miller from the TM School. I think there's a video that must be played before I speak.
I am founder and owner of a beekeeping enterprise named Bee African. Bee African is addressing unemployment, especially in rural areas. It is aimed at bridging the biodiversity knowledge gap, and we do so through our awareness campaign on the bee ecosystem and through our training program, and also through setting up beekeeping enterprises in rural areas. So at Bee African, we run a beehive production line. We repurpose pallets to make these beehives, where we then train them on the fundamentals of beekeeping, and we handhold them in terms of managing the beehives for optimal honey production, and we then purchase the honey back from them. So the grant funding that came with the program really enabled us to increase our beehive production capacity. We bought industrial machines for making beehives. I appreciated the financial module, in the sense that I started to have a good grasp of financial planning, budgeting, and sales projection. Our medium-term goal is to produce niche honey products, such as your condiments, your salad dressing. And our long-term goal is really to establish a beekeeping academy so that we can have a massive reach in terms of getting the unemployed into the beekeeping industry.
Thank you. This is a story of a TM School student. Her name is Memme, and I believe she might be here. Madam Vice Chancellor and the patron, I was walking around in the stalls at the Inter-African Trade Fair, and I met a student of ours who recognized me as I was walking around. And she told me that she came to the school to study trade at the school. And the knowledge that she got from the school, she was able to start this bee enterprise. Memme, if you are here, can you stand where you are? Maybe she did not make it. She was supposed to be here. Her name is Memme, and she is connecting all other African countries, bee farmers around the continent, and she would like to also expand this. And her main idea around this, she says she would like to see Africa standing as an equal and a peer on world trade. and I think she deserves a round of applause. His Excellency, the patron of the Thabo Mbeki African School, and the Chancellor of UNISA, Madam Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of South Africa, Professor Lenkabula, I beg your pardon, I should have said the Chair of Council is here. He just came in. The Chair of Council is here with us. And I think in the preparation of the speech, I was not aware that she will be here. So as I'm reading now, I realized that he needed to come in. The Chair of Council, of the UNISA Council, Dr. Musia, and the Vice Chancellor of UNISA, Professor Lenkabula, Professor Eunice Sekwe, Acting Vice Principal, Teaching and Learning, Community Engagement and Student Support, and all the members of the UNISA Management Committee in attendance here today. I also want to acknowledge members of the Diplomatic Corps representing various countries to South Africa present here this afternoon. All invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, I cannot hear you properly. Since the last conversation that we had here in August last year, 2024, there have been many global events that have affected our continent and the world. We have all seen the changing world order from unipolarity to multipolarity, the persistence of violent conflict in Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, DRC, the rise in tension in bilateral relations between South Africa and the US, coupled with the homegrown misinformation and disinformation coming from some sectors of our society, and the price South Africa is paying for its stance on international solidarity and peacekeeping missions. And we also know that South Africa assumed the chairmanship of the G20 in 2025 under the theme Solidarity, Equality, and Sustainability. In many ways, this should be a defining moment for the continent, as we are the first African country on the African continent to host the G20. And what does all of this mean for us as a continent and as a people? We also expect huge participation of our young people, which will take place in Johannesburg, the Y20, and our students here, we urge you to take participation in the Y20 summit, which will be held in Johannesburg in August. The Y20 is a leadership summit that convenes young professionals from G20 countries to develop solutions, policy solutions to current global challenges. Program Director, allow me to reiterate that the African Renaissance will be realized by a generation that aspires for intellectual growth and social change. Indeed, the African project of self-determination and social transformation remain urgent amidst the changing world order. The closing of taps by Donald Trump should teach us something. It should help us to rethink, to refocus, and eventually wean us from the dependency syndrome. Yes, you can. Whether that dependency is from the east or the west, from the north or the south, Africa must stand for its own position and take its own position. A new generation of Africans should know and see that Africa is an equal partner and a legitimate peer on world stage, not just in rhetoric, but also in deeds. It is upon this background that I present the overview and the purpose of the day to you this afternoon. In 2025, the TM School is observing 5 years since its inception in May 2020 and was launched virtually in September 2020. I think this is a great milestone that deserves a warm round of applause. It was during the difficult time of the COVID-19 pandemic, which also infected and affected some of our staff members. For close to 2 years, the staff of the new school could not meet. We did not even know our dean facially. We were seeing him on screen. We operated virtually due to the lockdown restrictions. And as we reflect on this 5-year milestone, we want to look back at some of the highlights and achievements to date. When we launched the school, and our intention in September 2022 was to launch the school, and unfortunately, we were inundated with emails from all of you about when do we register. At that time, we were still working hard on our accreditation, the different layers of accreditation of our formal programs. And we are now pleased to announce that the school has been granted full accreditation by the Department of Health, of Higher Education and Training. Thank you. And the Council of Higher Education also. And we are awaiting just one thing, the ID from SAQA. The ID SAQA should fast track our ID so that we are ready to go. If you care about educating future thought leaders and change agents for Africa, this is the time to invest in these young minds that will be here at the TM School. We invite all those who have the means to be part of sponsoring the first cohort of students to talk to us. Please talk to us if you are interested in sponsoring 10 MAs, master's degrees, or 10 PhD degrees. So I'm sure I'm speaking to businessmen here. I'm speaking to foreign missions as well, who wants to see the social transformation of this continent. And those of you who feel stagnant in your career and are looking for new insights in your field, or perhaps interested in benchmarking, enhancing knowledge, or even upskilling or reskilling, we have a bouquet of new advanced courses at short learning programs at advanced level. And they are at level 8. You can come and talk to us and register with us. That's the first achievement, the accreditation. The second one is that the school also were joined by a team of professors who are expert in their field, a new cohort of postdoctoral fellows, as well as I'm speaking, some of them are abroad at the moment, gaining international experience. We have currently one of our young scholar, Ashley Shangare in Russia, also doing some international experience there. The other important thing is that in terms of our publications, we managed to exceed our set per capita targets as a school as well. We have many publications that are coming through our professors. We have maintained and sustained requisite issues of our in-house journal, the International Journal of the African Renaissance Studies. And it has a new editor, Professor Spamandla Zondi. If you have a paper as well, please publish with us. We have a journal. Our training as well of electoral management bodies enjoys collaboration with 36 African countries. Just in the past 2 weeks, Professor Melo and our team were training the Independent Electoral Commission of Botswana. And through the school, UNISA will be one of the top 10 universities to host the UNESCO You Need to Win project of writing the general history of Africa under the leadership of Professor Sifiso Ndlovu. We also host a total of 5 engaged scholarship programs which are registered with UNISA up to date, and that include a flagship program known as Lekgotla la Batho, which is currently funded through the National Research Foundation Agency, the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement. Just on Tuesday, we hosted communities here from Salvakop, Mamelodi, and Atteridgeville. And we also boost a pool of international experts as our International Advisory Committee and numerous partnerships worldwide. And these are some of our achievements in the past 5 years. And we are also appealing to you to join us tomorrow at the Senate Hall, just outside of this hall. There is a Senate Hall, and that Senate Hall, we are going to have open day where we are going to be showcasing all our products that we are offering and our offerings as a school. So please join us tomorrow morning so that we can start on time and this will also be live streamed. If you are busy, you can watch from home. It will be on our page as well so that you can see what kind of offerings the school has. And the purpose of the conversation today, President Mbeki did not experience a pleasant youthful stage as he spent his youth struggling for social change in South Africa and the continent. Despite these setbacks, he completed his education. He therefore became the quintessential role model for many young people across the continent and beyond. His tenacity, resilience, and ability to persevere in adversity is exemplary to many young people today. It was his wish, in consultation with other former heads of states, to set up institutions that will develop a future generation of African thought leaders to facilitate the social transformation needed on the African continent. And in setting up this institution, he had to partner with UNISA, and he wanted young people to develop a strong second generation of African thought leaders by drawing on the intellectual, the social, and the general capital of current first generation of leaders. And this direct interaction that we usually host here, today we are on the 26th one. That's how long we have been doing this. Many of you, I know you started seeing it recently, but we have been doing it for the past 10 years. The direct interaction with the president also help us because it's broadcasted through various communication channels and platforms to draw on his intellectual capital. And that is why we are all here to do. And we will remember that women and youth are the main sectors of focus in his leadership practice. He did that in government, and he continues to do this with his foundation up to this day. And methodologically, these ideals find expression in the projects his foundation set up in collaboration with UNISA, such as Timali, and now the TM School, such as the Thabo Mbeki Presidential Library, as well as the South African Democracy Education Trust. And this model is not a new model, because this model is similar to the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And this happens throughout the world where great leaders are born. And we have this through, we do lectures, we do seminars, we do publications, so we do dialogues and conversations such as this. And this is why today we are presenting to you 3 capable students, people who have passed through our programs. And that's why we are here to engage with this intellectual capital and for all of you, the friends of the school. And I want to welcome all of you and thank you. Okay, sorry, they are just telling me Memme is here. Memme, the bee woman. I'm sure, yeah, just you can maybe share your story in just a second.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. Good afternoon, everyone. Dumelang. I'm going to be short, and I'm sorry I arrived late. So, okay, thank you. All right. So I'm going to take you back to 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, that was 2015. So I enrolled for programs, short learning programs through Timali. And of course, one of my favorite modules was thought leadership for Africa's Renaissance. And we would meet regularly, and the president would also, engage with us. And some of us would ask, but how are we going to drive this African Renaissance? That was a common question. And I remember this one instance, the president saying, and I don't forget that. I remember him saying, in rural areas, there's a shortage of water, tap water that is in our yards. So women have got to walk long distances, pushing wheelbarrows with drums of water in the wheelbarrow. Yes, just going out there to fetch water. By the time they come back, because the water source or the well would be far from the household, by the time they come back, they are tired and they still have to take care of the household, to run the household. And he then said, imagine if some of you can pool your resources and drill boreholes for some of these women in rural areas. So I could relate with that advice, Mr. President, because I'm a rural girl and I knew I've been through that particular journey. And so I decided that I will venture into beekeeping. So my enterprise is called Bee African. At Bee African, we really are driving the inclusion of rural women and youth in the beekeeping sector. We have established a number of beekeeping community enterprises in Northam, in Venda, in Marikana. We are just about to start one in Belfast through Exaro. So yes, if you want to be part of this movement, I urge you to engage me so we can see how many of those households we are going to transform and how are we going to someday have conversations with our grandchildren and say, we did contribute towards Africa's development. Thank you.
You see how our programs build confidence. We have to fight to get them off the stage. Well done, my darling. So well done. Okay, so can we quickly move on? Thank you so much, Prof. Baswana, for those insights and questions about both the global context and our school back home. I now invite our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, to do the opening and welcome remarks. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Like a good Dean, Professor Baswana wanted to showcase theory and practice. And what she did was to show you how people translate what they are taught in the classroom, in the laboratory, into tangible, experiential programs. I think, Professor Paswana, there must be a case study. And I'm aware that there are many students that have graduated to Timali, who will be graduating from the TM school, who will be doing great work, as our colleague has demonstrated, will take the opportunity to showcase their work as well. So thank you very much and congratulations for that wonderful case study of how theory and practice intersect to produce leaders who are not just thinking, but who also do. Thank you. I don't know, they put a stage behind the stage, and I apologize. I thought I might fall. No, I'm not as tall as you. No, it looks like it's to help me. Thank you. Let me thank Professor Paswana for laying the ground and for framing the issues. Let me recognize the presence of our Chancellor, President Thabo Mbeki, and also the patron of the TM School, to which Professor Paswana and the colleagues have already represented. His Excellency, we are honored that you are amongst us and that you have given your time to share your intellectual insights, leadership, history, and the contribution with the University of South Africa. I think that deserves a round of applause, colleagues. Thank you very much. Program Director, Professor Darlene Miller, Head of Citizenship Studies, TM School. Let me thank you already for having invited our interest. Let me recognize His Excellency, President Thabo Mbeki, the Chancellor of the University of South Africa, and the former President of the Republic of South Africa. Let's recognize the Chairperson of Council of the University of South Africa, and all members of Council present here this afternoon in person and virtually. And let me request my colleagues, the member of Management Committee, to recognize them. Can I request you to stand up? To the extreme right, there is Professor Siputa, the Registrar of the University. Can we do it? And then Professor Sekwe, responsible for teaching and learning. Dr. Molapo, responsible for strategy and risk management. Professor Mahanu, responsible for institutional advancement and people. And colleagues, as you know, UNISA has 26 regions in the country, in Ethiopia, and a presence in Eritrea. Some are in those different centers of the University of South Africa. I recognize that there is a presence of the diplomatic corps representing various countries to South Africa and led by the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, His Excellency Sali Omar Abdu, who's here with us as well, and all other diplomats that are here present. Let me also recognize the executive mayors, representatives of the royal houses, national, provincial, local government, business community, representatives of the various political parties in South Africa, and of course, let us recognize the leaders of the students, the primary stakeholder of the University of South Africa, the SRC Secretary General, Mr. Apiwe Dlamini, the students, your leaders. I saw them there. Can you give them a round of applause? You might lose elections if you're not being clapped for, so you better work hard on your campaign protocols. Let me recognize also the moderator, Professor Anthony van Nieuwkerk. Yes, I was going to say Van Fake. Van Nieuwkerk, Ms. Sandy Mutale, Francois Anderson, Katleho Matabe, and representatives of different media houses, colleagues, and of course, let me recognize all of you who made time to form part of this important event in the calendar of the University of South Africa. Can I request a round of applause for yourselves? President Mbeki, Excellency, as we meet this afternoon, UNISA is hosting about 5 events that are quite important for the academic, intellectual, and scientific agenda of the country as it is of the continent. And this is in spirit of the call that leaders like you, the forebears in the national and continental imagination of how institutions of higher learning could be sites and centers of excellence in the formation of students, of leaders, and of people who will demonstrate care, love, dignity, integrity, and freedom in the best ways that they should, are coalescing towards. At this point when we meet, the University of South Africa is hosting an association in the world of technology universities, but also TVET colleges, globally called ATUPA, precisely because this university has found it not adequate that we receive 1 million applications, but we are only able as a university to take in 400,000 students. As such, the management and the council of the university, especially anchored by the Senate, saw it important that the interface between TVET colleges and universities and how we create articulation is also supported through global collaborative partnerships. And we're quite appreciative because even in your works, in your appeals for education to being a resource for youth and young adults to taking advantage of the dividends of democracy that was hard won, it has always been important, a call that not only universities must be the centers of knowledge, but TVET colleges must be improved to ensure that they are competitive. We heeded to that counsel, and we are committed to being the partners in ensuring that the quality of the TVET college education and articulation in the university system is also improved. But it was also at a time when you were leading this country that you had a vision of South Africa to creating beyond nascent sciences, where we describe one another, how we dream, how we dress, how we think, how we laugh, how we sing, and how we talk. In that imagination, you thought it was important for South Africa to have a foresight of 100 years or more by ensuring that we instituted the square kilometer array as a horizon of thinking around space sciences, data systems, radio astronomy, and so on. This was quite important because although Africa and its historical archives has always been at the center of astronomy, those archives are often forgotten, and therefore, when you instituted this, you helped us to move beyond just the meerkat and other telescopes that South Africa had invested in. And our university was hosting African societies of astronomy, including the presence of other astronomers from the global knowledge arena, as well as NASA. And we are quite appreciative that as we study histories, the humanities, the social sciences, including diplomacy, we have seen it as an important imperative as the University of South Africa to look into the place of science, natural sciences, and how the sciences, mathematics, and associated disciplines are also strengthened in a context and in a society that requires them to improving the developmental trajectory of our society and extricating ourselves from dependency in industrial systems. And therefore, we're quite appreciative that this particular and important event is still ongoing, but allows us to have youth and young adults in our country that are pursuing science beyond the sky. They are no longer limited by the saying that the sky is the limit. For them, the sky is a horizon of research, is a horizon of helping us to map and to imagine the future. But also it's a conversation with the social sciences on how we manage water here on Earth as we do in the moon. These are unimaginable things that the students at UNISA and their professorate are undertaking, and I'm quite heartwarmed by their commitment. Equally important, therefore, Chancellor, is the fact that as we meet here in this important conversation with you, UNISA academicians are reflecting with other academics around what is the role, the place, and the contribution of intellectuals in the shifting geopolitical and economic landscapes that Professor Paswana has so eloquently described for us. We're therefore engaging in the G20 discussions to saying, how do we resource through research the negotiators? How do we ensure that the voices of societies are also projected in these engagements that our government and other governments are engaging on? How do we ensure that the dialogue, such as this dialogue that we're having, become meaningful and help us to ensure that events such as G20 are not just talk shops or just major events that just allow people to meet each other, but they have the resonant impact of transformation, of change, and of ensuring that Africa's voices in the global world are not muted, but projected. That we shift the oppressions, the marginalization, and the limitation of Africa in shaping the world. And therefore, I'm quite appreciative because therefore, as we meet here, we are looking into the improvements that the University of South Africa is making, which are quite exciting because it therefore tells us that the students, the academics, the professionals and administrative staff understand that UNISA is an asset of society, is the progenitor of the higher education. It cannot be known only for its size, it must be known for its impact, not just here at home, but in the world. And therefore, with these words, we want to take from your counsel that universities must not be ivory towers that are inaccessible or indifferent to the challenges that societies are contending with. But they must produce knowledge that fundamentally helps us as society, as governments, as private sector and public sector, and as citizens to understanding and valuing knowledge for the betterment of society and ecological justice. Welcome to UNISA, the home of the Chancellor. Welcome to UNISA, the home of leaders. If you don't have a diploma, degree, or master's or PhD from UNISA, that's a deficiency. You know why? Let me tell you, I think I have evidence, President. The Chancellor himself is an alumnus of this university. President Mandela is the alumnus of this university. Listen, colleagues, President Mandela is the alumnus of this university. President Ramaphosa is the alumnus of this university. And political opposition leaders, But we don't just do politics. We do science, colleagues. We do economics. So if you have 10 rands, if you check who signed it, they graduated from this hall. If you think of Jill Marcus, you think of Lisecha Khanyago, they graduated from the halls of UNISA. So I can say without fear or favor that you're missing out if you don't go through the corridors of this liberation university committed to shaping futures with you. Welcome, enjoy yourselves in the engagement processes.
Thank you so much, Visi. How we sing, how we love, how we talk, how we dream. What an inspirational leader we have. Please give her a round of applause. Now we are going to take a message of support from that oh so important constituency, Mr. Nkosinati. But before I do that, just to complete our protocols, I'd like to acknowledge the chairperson of council, Prof. Masia, and other VPs present here, Prof. Supporter, registrar, and Prof. Magano, institutional advancement. Oh, yes. What's his name? Okay. So we're actually going to have Apiwe Dlamini give the presentation on behalf of the National SRC, the Students' Representative Council of UNISA. One little detail, our open day tomorrow, the time is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. tomorrow. So do please join us. We want you to be an active member of the UNISA family. You never know where it can land up. Look at all the presidents in our ranks. Come closer to us. Okay, so can I call on Apiwe? Ah, here you are. A young man in the room.
Mandla. Awi, two. Mandla. Awi, two. Ayeye mfundo ase UNISA, ayeye. Ayeye mfundo ase UNISA, ayeye. Ayeye mfundo pasayo, ayeye. Mandla. Awi, two. Thank you very much. My name is Apiwe Dlamini, the National Secretary General of the National SRC, leading currently 370,000 students. I'm not leading a GNU, we are alone here. Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone. Good afternoon. A special greeting to His Excellency, the Chancellor, Thabo Mbeki. Greetings to the Vice Chancellor, Prof. Lenkabula. To all UNISA students who are here, young, vibrant. I see all of you who are representing all UNISA students who are here in this venue. It is an honor to stand before you today as the National Secretary General, and who is here today to say to our Vice Chancellor and His Excellency Thabo Mbeki that we as UNISA students, we really appreciate your presence to be standing here, and we hope today to hear from your wisdom and to be able to learn. Yet we are gathered here today, we are gathered here under the shadow of the enemy called student debt. His Excellency, over 1 billion in debt in UNISA alone, denies thousands of students, that robs our society of their potential to go to their society and make a contribution. Chancellor Mbeki, today we humbly call on you to lend your voice to our fight, to fight the debt relief. Let us clear all these barriers so that students can graduate, contribute, and uplift Africa. We also want to thank the Motsepe Foundation for their scholarship, a vital step in this battle. But we need more allies to the UNISA community joining us to make sure that we fight this debt. The National SRC is currently engaged in many different parts of the world in trying to contribute into student lives. Most of our current mission that we are currently doing is to make sure that we are advocating for inclusive policies that will address the affordability, the mental health, and the academic support. And also we understand that the university is a university of young people, vibrant people. We are advocating that we also want sport to be given to our students. So we are also engaged on that to introduce sports and make sure that our students are also getting the same benefits that the staff members are getting. We would like to also state it here that we are happy to have the chairperson of Chancellor here, standing here today with us. And we also want to appreciate the management work that they have been doing. But we also want to say inclusive. UNISA is no longer a university that was perceived for as old people. UNISA is a university for everyone. So when I mean by everyone, we are here to stay. All university and high schools, they must make sure that they must never play with this university to think that it's only attract old people. We are young here. This SRC is led by young people. Come to UNISA, come and learn to UNISA, come and study to UNISA. Mandela.
Viva UNISA students, viva! You're welcome, our students. Okay, so we've peeled off the layers now, and we've identified and acknowledged all the quarters, and now comes the juice of today. Tata, it's your turn now. We want to have you here up on our stage, please, patron. Thank you, audience, for rising. Really, Boa. Let's ululate. Okay, and then I'd like to also invite our students and alumni who are present for our panel discussion, and the moderator, Professor Antoni van Niekerk, and Professor Antoni will introduce the speakers as well. So I hand over to Professor Antoni van Niekerk now. He's at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs as well. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Professor Miller. I don't know about this platform now. Do we leave it for the president?
No, you look silly there.
Yeah.
Too tall, man.
It's called a role reversal. Thank you. I'm very happy to moderate this part of the proceedings. I think many of you are looking forward. My name is Antoni van Niekerk. I work at the TM School. And at the school, I specialize in international relations. I'm very hungry to say a few words about that, but I'm going to leave that to the students. At the school and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, we work together to advance the cause of the African Renaissance. And we want to demonstrate to you how we do that in the next hour or two. In fact, I don't know how much time we have.
Well, we're supposed to go to 5, but we were late. So.
We go to 5. Okay, but we'll be guided by the President. And by the Vice Chancellor. Thank you very much. Let me bring to the stage our three students. And as I read their very brief bios, they can come up.
I'm sorry, I don't want to mess your program. The SG said he forgot to do something. I don't know what it is.
Oh, where is
So
he?
here he is. He says he was so overwhelmed,
Yeah.
he couldn't do what he wanted to do. So I
But-
don't know if we can give him just 1 minute.
Let me consult. Are you going to sing a struggle song?
No. As we said, that this is a university of young people. We are not in church here. So I had to listen to the wisdom of our president. So before we do that, we must be jubilant and we must be happy. How nobody wanna see us okay. How nobody wanna see us okay. How nobody, mommy, no. No. How nobody wanna say us okay. How nobody wanna say us okay. How nobody, mommy, no. No. How let me tell you about the story of my life. Oh, my mother was a kitchen king. Oh, my father was a garden pole. How this why I'm a leader, I wanna marry you. How I wanna marry you. How no. Oh no. Thabo Mbeki awuzimuradaga ufela hawe molo chi Thabo Mbeki awuzimuradaga ufela hawe molo Thabo Mbeki awuzimuradaga ufela hawe molo Hongitenge ande wemolo hawe molo chi bolo Thabo Mbeki awuzimuradaga ufela hawe molo Manda, hey, two.
I think that's woken us up. And the temperature is right for the next session. So let me introduce our panel. As I read their very brief biographies, they can take a chair sitting next to the President and the VC. Katlego Matebe is a public representative with over a decade-long experience in local government. She has served in various political structures since the 1980s and civil society organizations. She is a graduate of the TM School, She graduated with an advanced course in diplomacy studies with distinction. And allow me to say that she wrote excellent essays, which I was very happy to grade. And she's currently studying for the advanced course in intelligence management. Ah. And she has recently been accepted for a MSc in Cities at the London School of Economics and Political Science, which is an achievement. But VC, I think, will have to bring her back after that stint in London. She needs to come back to UNISA. Let me then introduce Sandy Motale, as she makes her way to the chair. More than 15 years of experience in corporate and government parastatals as a communications manager, PRO and stakeholder relationship manager with several parastatals and private sector organizations. She's currently the chairperson of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus for Tshwane Council, representing all 15 political parties in council. And she is doing the advanced program in policy making and analysis for Africa's development at our school. So welcome, Sandy. Our third panelist, so to speak, is Francois Anderson. And as he comes up to stage, he tells me that he's been working in the private and government sector in KZN for the past 25 years, completing various projects for Department of Education and the Department of Health. In 21, he transitioned to education, where he finds himself currently as an ICT manager and educator. He works at Kloof High School near Durban. And he came from there yesterday to join us today. Welcome, Francois. He completed the advanced program in Dynamics of Peace and Conflict in Africa at UNISA. So welcome to our panel. Before I ask them to lead into the conversation, I just want to recognize a whole number of our own South African former ambassadors in the audience, President. I think you've noticed some of them. And this is your backup team in case you get very difficult questions. Because as they sit there, all of them have very deep experience of the conflict areas that our students want to talk to you about. There are also other ambassadors from other countries, and if I can add this point, Mr. President, they have come to the TM school and to UNISA to say, when are you getting accredited? I want to do a PhD at this school because I'm inspired by the President and by the idea of an African Renaissance. So now is the time. We're going to bring all of them closer to this place. Thank you very much. Let me ask Sandy to kick off our conversation with making a statement and then also asking a question or two. But before you do that, let me ask President Mbeki, would you like to hear the three students one after the other? Is that your preference? Very good. So Sandy, we're going to start with you, followed by Katlego, and then we end with Francois. You can speak from where you sit or you can come to the podium.
Thank you, Prof. My name is Sandy Motale, as already introduced by Prof. Van Niekerk. Let me start by greeting the former state president, the chancellor, as well as the patriot of the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, the principal and vice chancellor Prof. Buleng Linkabunyani, Prof. Linkabule, Prof. Eunice Sikwe, who's the acting vice principal and teaching and learning and community engagement, the acting dean, Prof. Paswane, all directors, fellow panelists, members of the public, members of the media, former diplomats, as well as our distinguished guest. Just a correction from Prof. I'm also a former alumni for the diplomacy study and currently studying towards a program in policy analysis for Africa's development. Thank you, just that correction. A question to the President, and it's more around balancing sovereignty and economic development. As things stand, the United States is our second largest trading partner. And in 2022, there was a bilateral trade of over 23 billion. And as things stand, we have AGOA, which has been providing duty-free access for over 6,000 South African products, benefiting industries like automotive, agriculture, and mining. The potential loss of AGOA, obviously, in recent debate, could cost thousands of jobs. And as things are, we have a high number of unemployment in South Africa. Jobs that could be lost, especially in export-driven industries like fruits, farming, automotive, and manufacturing. China, on the other hand, has taken USA as our largest trading partner. However, the dependency on China does come with risks, and those risks are in a form of debt accumulation and resource extractions. So my question to the Vice and the former statement is, should South Africa shift from politically driven diplomacy, which in its own, it's historically focused on human rights and solidarity, or to economic-driven policy where trade and investment and innovation partners takes precedence? That's my first question. Okay, and then my second question is on diplomatic competency and appointment. So we all know that we have His Excellency Ibrahim Rasool that has been recalled at the overtension that is Russia and Israel, which raises questions about whether South Africa can afford to alienate a super global power like USA. The dismissal of His Excellency Rasool and allegations against other SA former diplomats suggest a trend of underperformance and misalignment with national interest. And as things stand, the appointment of diplomats in South Africa has often been prioritized or criticized for prioritizing political loyalty over professional qualification and meritocracy. In 2015, I think there was a parliamentary question by the then former Minister of International Relations, Me Maite Nkwana Mashabane, and her response was, our diplomats must have impacting negotiation skills and effective representation as one of the requirements. But in Africa alone, Kenya, you can never become a public rep without a formal qualification or a degree, a university degree. Germany and Canada requires all the ambassadors to go through rigorous diplomatic training and international relations before appointment. Asia, on the other hand, it's a desirable competition to get into the service. So with South Africa, we have a pool of knowledge, and I believe we can benefit from the merit-based selection of diplomats. And perhaps maybe we need to follow the route of Chapter 9 institutions, where we need a parliamentary oversight in terms of diplomatic appointment. My question to the President with that regard is, should we perhaps, to ensure a balance of political representation and technical competency, shouldn't we have a parliamentary committee that goes through the selection process? And my last question is with regards to the program that I'm busy with, that is policy making and analysis for Africa's development. And my concern with that and why I chose the program was because I was concerned about continuity of progressive policies. The African Renaissance did promote a lot of regional integration. It did promote economic self-sufficiency and Pan-African governance reforms. It also gave birth to formation of institutions like NEPAD. So the AU Agenda 2063 has taken some of the elements of the African Renaissance. However, our slow diminishing influence in the AU has slowed our leadership role and influence with regards to the AU. Therefore, the rise of regional economic blocs presents an opportunity for us as South Africans to perhaps participate and lead economic development as the leader in Africa. Then my question to the press is, as South Africa currently, do we have a strategy? And that should we perhaps establish, or government establish, a dedicated policy unit within the Department of International Relations and Cooperative Governance to ensure long-term implementation of progressive policies? Thank you.
Say again? So she's saying, how do we implement Agenda 2063 of the African Union? Do we have to do more? Do we have to put a policy unit, presidency or in DIRCO, to ensure implementation and long-term sustainability of our involvement in economic development in Africa? Is that a good summary? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask Katlego. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. I think you're tall enough. You don't need that. Thank you very much. Is it on? Tap it. Is it on? Speak.
There we go. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. His Excellency, the former President of the Republic of South Africa, Chancellor of the University and Patron of the Thabo Mbeki School, our former President, President Thabo Mbeki, the Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Puleng Linkabuga, and Linkabula. Ma'am, your surname is difficult. Linkabula. Is it right now? Linkabula. It's just like mine. They usually say Mateba, and it's Matebe, so I apologize. And the chairperson of the University of Council and the council members, and Professor UNISA, the acting vice president of teaching, learning, community engagement, and student support, the acting dean of the Thabo Mbeki School, Professor Edith Paswana, and all professors in the TM School, all directors in the TM School, ambassadors present here today, and members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow students. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I am very passionate about the African continent, and I'll focus on the continent. Program Director, the contemporary analysis of today's diplomacy presents the African continent with an opportunity to revisit the African agenda in the interest of peace, stability, and growth. South Africa's response to today's diplomatic environment is significant to advance African solidarity, sustainable development, and equality. If there is going to be an African Renaissance, South Africa's contribution and unity with other African countries is more important than ever. Mr. President, the AU established an important framework, the African Peace and Security Architecture, to promote peace, security, stability across the continent. Its objectives, among others, is to enhance African ownership and leadership in peace and security initiatives. Further, it intends to strengthen regional mechanisms for prevention, management, and resolution of conflicts. One of the key components of the African Peace and Security Architecture is the Peace and Security Council, which is a principal decision-making power to promote peace and stability within the continent. Despite such an important framework as a reference point for conflict resolution in the continent, there seem to lie gaps in African countries to resolve conflicts internally. And I can make reference to the most recent events, Mr. President, the hosting of the Rwandan president and the DRC president in Qatar, and not by an African country. While on the one hand, Mr. President, you were hosting the former President Kabila here at home. We didn't know how to read that situation. And the M3 conundrum, yet an important player in the DRC conflict, the withdrawal of the Angola from the DRC-Rwanda mediation. But what is more comforting is that there's a positive step, the appointment of a panel of 5 former heads of state to mediate the DRC conflict, including our very own former President Kgalema Motlanthe. Mr. President, in this context, then my question is, with this framework in place, and given the most recent developments, what are the shortcomings of our own mediation processes in Africa? What assessments may be made of the AU's influence in terms of the effectiveness of this framework? Is it leadership issues and/or institutional challenges, or any other interests that you might not be aware of? The resolution of the conflict in the DRC has implications for peace, stability, and development in Africa, as successful mediation will signal the continent's path towards technological advancement. DRC is the world's largest cobalt producer, which is used in military and high-end technology. Therefore, the stability of the DRC is significant for Africa's global influence and development. In conclusion, I also want to touch briefly on the G20 presidency, what it represents to us. There is an opportunity for South Africa to take the lead in advocating for the reform of global debt frameworks, given the debt trap of most of the African countries. I therefore, Mr. President, am of the view that South Africa should use its G20 presidency to advocate for reforms to the international financial architecture, aiming to make multilateral development banks better equipped to tackle sustainable development and cross-border challenges. I thank you.
Hello. Yes. I just want to start with my grade 12s are watching. They know there's a test when the term starts, so they must listen. They must listen. I just want to start acknowledging the former president of South Africa, Chancellor of UNISA, the patron of the TM School, His Excellency Mr. Mbeki, then the Vice Chancellor Principal, Professor Puleng. Lenkabule. Okay. Acting Vice Principal of Teaching and Learning, Professor Eunice Sikwe. Acting Executive Dean of the TM School, Professor Edith Paswana, and all the directors and ambassadors and everybody present here. Thank you and thank you to the school for allowing me this opportunity to actually participate here. Mr. President, I have some notes here, and My topic that I want to discuss and ask questions about is our newly designed GNU and this organism that was created last year and how it's growing and evolving as time goes along. When President Cyril Ramaphosa was inaugurated last year, June, we saw the creation of the GNU. And I want to talk about the governance of the GNU. When I look at governance, I see a framework of procedures and functions and structures and rules born out of a relationship between groups within an organization, being the GNU. All right, then we turn to the medium-term development plan, which was set out for 2024 to 2029. And their guidance is inclusivity, poverty eradication, economic growth, and sustainable development. All right. Now, this forms part of this is basically the last phase in our National Development Plan vision for 2030. All right. Which makes it also important because this is the last medium-term development plan before 2030. All right. In President Ramaphosa's opening speech last year, he mentioned to drive inclusive economic growth and job creation, reduce poverty and tackle the high cost of living, building a capable, ethical and developmental state. All right. Now we're going to fast forward to this year's budget speech. I'm hearing, All right. And the proposals were made for an increase in VAT of 0.5% this year and next year. Government spending is going to increase. South Africa continues to battle a rise in their debt obligation. And as far as I know, the VAT increase was approved this afternoon because Nedbank said not one of the banks sent out a message saying that it was adopted. Now, this brings me to where does this leave South Africa? And my questions are, good governance should ensure that all political and social and economic priorities are based on consensus and that the voice of the vulnerable are heard. All right, now looking at the GNU, do we have the right partners? If we look at the power dynamics and the communication within the GNU, do they have a plan for economic growth? All right, we need that to grow the economy. Some of the parties around the table are talking about what is my party bringing to the table? What have my party done for the GNU? Nobody's saying, what are we doing for South Africa? How are we growing it for South Africa, for the citizens? Where does that, I'm not seeing a cohesive entity because they are still talking from different mouthpieces. Where does that leave us as South Africans and the continent at the end of the day if the GNU can't work and grow into a cohesive unit? Thank you, that's one. Thank you.
President, it's your turn to respond. You can sit or take the podium. It's better there. Must I move the... You want it?
We need it.
Yeah, you need it. Yeah.
Is that yours?
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Anthony. Before trying to answer these difficult questions, let me say welcome to everybody. I think it's the first time or this kind of session that we have so many people in this hall. But thanks a lot for coming. But there's a distinguished South African who's with us today who has not been acknowledged. So I want to acknowledge him. He's become a bit of a superstar. I'm talking about Dr. Mbuyiseni Dlozi. Welcome, Chief. Now, with regard to these questions that have been posed, fortunately, with regard to the last group of questions, fortunately, I'm a retiree and therefore cannot really speak about the GNU except as an outside observer. If you look at the government website and you look for what Francois talked about, the medium-term development plan, you won't find it. It's not there. I say that because I looked for it. Because I really wanted to understand what is it, medium-term development plan, because it's about the issues that is raising, about the reduction of poverty, eradication of poverty, reduction of unemployment, all of those questions. And the reason it's not there, I'm told, is that the draft was prepared and then discussed at Cabinet Lekotla, and various suggestions emerged out of that Lekotla, and so it requires amending it, after which it will then be posted on the website, government websites. But fortunately, I've got friends in high places. So they leaked to me the draft. So my comments, therefore, about it are based on the draft, not the complete finalized document. I think all of us in the room here are familiar with the National Development Plan, the NDP. And the basic complaint by everybody, including government, is that very little was done to implement the NDP. And an important part of the reason for that is that the NDP was not a plan. It's not a plan. It's a vision. This is what we would like South Africa to look like by the year 2030. In this element, and this and that and the other. But it does not say what is it that you do in order to get there. That's the same problem with the medium-term development plan. It's not a plan. Maybe it's a vision, maybe it's a wish list. It calls itself a development plan, but it isn't. Not in the form, in the draft form in which I've seen it. So Francois, with regard to the question that you are raising, does this GNU have an economic growth plan? That plan would have been reflected in the medium-term development plan, but it isn't. One of the strange things, and maybe I should say this, about the medium-term development plan, is that its drafting was put out to tender. So the highest bidder won the tender and drafted the plan. Yeah. And that tells you something about the GNU. I do not know quite what is going to happen, but as I say, what I've been told is that it's being polished up or whatever, to take on board whatever comments came out of the government, Cabinet Lekgotla. So in the end, it will be published. I would urge all of us to have a look at it, to see whether my assessment is right or wrong. I suspect my assessment is right. So essentially, my fear is that we're landed with a situation where, in fact, there will not be a government-approved, actual, realistic economic growth development program. Don't exist. What will mean in terms of the South African economy is not positive. You'll recall, everybody would recall here that in 2020, in fact, even just before COVID-19 hit us, a national consensus developed, which was that the problems in the country are so serious, economic problems I mean, socio-economic, that they required a joint and agreed joint effort by all of the social partners. Government said that, business said that, the trade union said that, civil society said that. As a result of which, as you would recall, a process started to prepare to draft what was called a social compact, which meant all of us as South Africans would come together and say, what is it that we do together in order to overcome these socio-economic challenges? As part of that process, the government developed an economic recovery and reconstruction plan, which President Ramaphosa, I remember, put to the joint sitting of Parliament, I think in October 2020, and said from the point of view of government, this is what needs to happen. The social partners need to get together to achieve the following things. I think that was in October. In July of the same year, the business section, the social partner business, made their own proposal about the same question, what is to be done about the economy, and presented their proposal in July 2020. So we had these two proposals, which were part of this discussion by the social partners. July 2020, business says, let's do this. And government in October says, let's do that. In terms of the broad principles, these two programs don't differ. The importance, for instance, of investment in infrastructure would be emphasized in both documents, and other matters of this kind. There was a meeting, one of the meetings I attended, and I say at the meeting, my view about this process, that process, was when we looked at the government program, it was 32 pages. Dr. Ndlozi. When I looked at the government program, at the business one, it was 132 pages. So I said to the meeting that it seems to me that more work was done by the business people to detail what it is that needed to be done. And so in terms of the negotiations through that NEDLEC process, why don't we take the government plan as a vision? This is where we want to get to. And use the business one to negotiate among ourselves. I remember President Ramaphosa saying at the end of his speech, he said I was correct about the submission of business. A business indeed had made a submission, but I was wrong in one respect, which was that the business plan was not 132 pages, but was 1,000 pages. One of the striking things about the business proposal is that they say, this is what we propose in detail should happen to the South African economy over a 3-year period. At the end of that, we look at what has happened and then do another 3-year program. And they said the program we're proposing over a 3-year period would cost 3.2 trillion rand. 3.2 trillion. And they said, the private sector, we commit ourselves to invest 1 trillion rand over that 3-year period. And the public sector would have to find the other 2.2 trillion. So I said, this is 2020. The very, very first time that the private sector in this country had ever made such a commitment since 1994. It was the very, very first time in 2020 that the private sector would say we commit ourselves to invest in the South African economy. So I was saying that what the government should do is really to put that commitment in the pocket and insist and do whatever is necessary to make sure that it actually happens. That process, as I think everybody knows, disappeared somewhere. It vanished. No social compact. And I think as a country we lost this commitment of this huge investment by the private sector in the economy. I'm raising that, Francois, to say, I think that's where we need to go back to. I think the GNU needs to say, there's that process to try and elaborate a social compact, which for some reason got abandoned somewhere, and yet a lot of preparatory work had been done. Why don't we go back to that in order to give substance to the MTDP, to the Medium-Term Development Plan, substance which does not exist in the current plan. That's where I would go. Because indeed, to discuss this other matter that we're raising, about the budget and VAT and all of that, it's clear that in terms of the state revenues, the fiscal matters, the generation of the revenues that the state needs to impact on development and other things, we are not going to be able to solve this problem in the absence of in the presence of a stagnant economy. Doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter whether we say now, do we raise VAT or do we raise income tax or whatever you want to do. You're going to run into problems in a situation where the economy is stagnant. The additional resources that the state needs must come from a larger economy. Hence the critical importance of ensuring that we don't have wish lists which we call development plans, but actual plans. Actual plan which says in a year's time we want to be from here to there. And part of what that business plan did, it said, within this next 3 years, if we do the following things, we will invest 1 trillion, government, you invest the rest, And at the end of the 3 years, we should have created so many new jobs. We will have expanded the money going to the fiscals by so much. Things that are measurable. With commitments that you are business, you are government, you are trade union, or whatever, with commitments that can be met. I'm saying that I think that's where we need to go back to that. The medium-term development plan is not going to help us. Now, whether the government of national unity thinks the way I think, I don't know. But I'm saying as a country, we need to get back to a situation where we do actual planning about the economic future. And not depend on visions, which we think will implement themselves. Visions don't. They are necessary, but they don't implement themselves. The government of national unity, of course, has got to sort itself out. The government, I see sometimes that some of the ministers there, one of them was debating about a bill that was in Parliament, and he wanted to amend it. I was saying to myself that what he doesn't understand, that particular minister, was that every single bill that comes out of government to Parliament, it comes from the cabinet. It doesn't come from a minister. It might be a minister who goes to present it there, but it's a policy decision of the cabinet. So you can't stand up as a minister and say, no, I want to change it. You can't. But I'm just saying that maybe it's people who are new to government and therefore didn't know quite what to do. The issues that were raised at the beginning about the US, China, AGOA, risks related to China, preference, is it trade or diplomacy, whatever. I think as a country, we must, as a matter of policy, say that we are not looking for enemies. We must conduct a foreign policy which says we want friendly and mutually beneficial cooperation with everybody in the world. And that even if we reach a bilateral agreement with country A, we don't reach that agreement as a way of opposing another country. So the idea that you've got to choose this one rather than that one, we can't accept that. I'm saying as a government, as a country, we need to make sure that we try and build good relations with the US, good relations with China, and good relations with everybody. That's how we should come at it. And the notion that you must have better relations with the one with whom you have more trade than the one with whom you don't, I think is wrong. We want good relations with all of them, with China, with the US. There are problems, of course, as you know now, between the relations between South Africa and the United States currently. Personally, it's a matter that worries me. Because as a country, we don't need enemies. We've got too many problems for us to be nurturing enemies of any kind. As all of us know, President Trump is serving his second term as President of the United States. So as a country, we've actually got experience of our relationship with President Trump from the first term. And for 4 years, during that first term, we actually had very good relations with the Trump administration. The ambassador at the time, those of us who are old enough, like Moise and Close, will remember her. It was Ambassador Lana Marx, a lady. One of the things about her was that she was born in East London and migrated to the United States, was an American citizen, but South Africa remained in her heart. So President Trump chose her as his ambassador to South Africa. And indeed, she came, and I get a message that she'd like to see me, so I saw her before she had presented her credentials. And she says, President, the reason I wanted to see you is to introduce myself to you and to say to you that my instructions from the US are that in terms of everything I do here in order to improve relations between the United States and South Africa, I must seek your opinion. So I said to her, but I'm a retiree. She said, it doesn't matter, but that's my instruction. And indeed, we worked very well with her. I'm telling you this story, colleagues, in order to say, therefore, the current relations come as a surprise to me. Because you had the President Trump of that first term, and South Africa had very good relations with that administration. I'm not quite sure what has happened now. In particular because, now if I can put on an older cap, as the ANC, we have a long history of interacting with the Republican Party in the United States. They were very, very much involved, the Republican Party, in the struggle against apartheid. You'd remember that, I think it was in 1986, that the US Congress approved what they called the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act, which was vetoed by President Reagan, Republican President Reagan, vetoed that act. Now, it is possible, according to the US Constitution, it's possible to override the veto of the president by Congress taking a decision with particular majorities. I think particularly the Senate. And the struggle to override the veto by President Reagan was led by Republican presidents. I even remember the names. Senator Lugar, Senator Nancy, remember her? Castlebaum. Those two Republican senators organized in Senate to Republican senators to override a decision by a Republican president in favor of sanctions against apartheid South Africa. I'm giving that as an example, colleagues, who say that this is part of the history of our relationship with the Republican Party. And therefore, when you have a situation as we have now, with all these tensions, my view is that we need to have a very serious engagement with President Trump and the administration to discuss and say, what's the problem? Because the problem is new. In terms of the history of our relationship with the Republican Party, which goes over many decades, we've never faced a situation of this kind. What's the problem? We need to sit down and sort this thing out. I'm not talking about this full story about persecution of Afrikaners and all that. More substantial. What's the thing that has happened which results in this tension, which South Africa does not need between ourselves and the US? I think that's what needs to happen. It is true that in the context of which we might even save AGOA, because indeed, as you said Sandy, there are many of our products into the United States which go in duty-free because of AGOA, which might not get access in those markets if that AGOA is removed, resulting in job losses here, and so we don't want that. So I think we need that very serious engagement with President Trump, with the Republican Party, and bearing in mind that when we talk about President Trump, we talk about somebody who has been elected as President of the United States by a very substantial majority. We don't want to be quarreling with this majority of Americans. Hence the need for us to engage seriously about these things with President Trump and the Republican Party to identify, isolate whatever the problems are. It's very, very easy to explain. It would be very simple to explain to them about this fake story about the persecution of Afrikaners and so on, entirely fake. I think it would be very easy to get rid of that particular story, to show that it's not true. So that we can then get to the more substantive matter. There must be something more substantive which results in this kind of friction. Our moderator pointed to a number of ambassadors who are in the room here, who might talk about being an ambassador more authoritatively than I can. As I'm sure all of us know, this is a very important post, a very important position. An ambassador is a representative of the head of state to another head of state. That's what an ambassador does. They are so important, these people, that sometimes they carry the title extraordinary and plenipotentiary. So you can see that Ambassador Ndlozi, extraordinary and plenipotentiary. That expression means, here is Ambassador Ndlozi, appointed as our representative in Zimbabwe, as the ambassador to Zimbabwe. As he interacts with the president of Zimbabwe, an issue arises of importance in terms of the relations between the two countries, which requires a policy decision. And the policy isn't there. But the matter of ensuring that we have got these good relations is critically important. Because this ambassador is extraordinary and plenipotentiary, they are allowed actually to take what is a policy position, to commit a whole country to a policy which is created by this ambassador in order to sort out the relations between these two countries. I'm talking about the importance of the post of ambassador. Part of the process of the appointment of an ambassador is President Mbeki says Mbuyiseni Ndlozi should go to Zimbabwe as our ambassador. That's a request to the President of Zimbabwe. To say to the President of Zimbabwe, I propose to send to you Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. Will you accept him? And the President of Zimbabwe is perfectly entitled to say no. And the reason for that might very well be because the Zimbabwe embassy here in Pretoria, when they are asked by Harare, who is this Ndlozi? They report he's a thief. As a consequence of which, the ambassador in Zimbabwe, the president in Zimbabwe, will say, no, but how do I talk to a thief? So the appointment is rejected. I'm talking about the importance of this. The ambassador that gets posted is by agreement with the host country. With the host country having made their own assessment that this person of such caliber and quality, that indeed this is a person that the head of state can engage. Because you are an envoy to the head of state. Now you can therefore understand that as such an envoy, you can't go around expressing negative opinions about your host. The diplomatic team here of our diplomatic corps is here. He knows this very well. You can't, you get Ambassador Ndlozi, who's an ambassador to South Africa. I'm president. You can't make speeches to say, that one doesn't wash. He's smelly. You can't do that. It may be correct. But he can't say that. Because it means, from then onwards, there is no way I can talk to him. He ceases to be an ambassador that is respected by this host. So I'm saying that the post of ambassador has got particular restrictions. There's even conventions, the Vienna Convention, which govern the behavior of diplomats. Ibrahim Rasool is an old friend and comrade of mine. But I think in this instance he made a mistake. He said things about his host president, which he should not have said. When I saw this and I saw this personal non grata, I wasn't surprised. Because it means practically you make an assessment of your host president, which is negative. And you want to sit with that president tomorrow. They won't agree. This is your view of me. Now you want to come and sit and talk serious matters with me? No. I was very glad when he landed in Cape Town, Ibrahim, when he's talking to people, that he was insisting that whatever might have happened in his case, it was critically important that South Africa must understand that it needs good relations with the United States. It was correct. So his proficiency as a diplomat, and fortunately our school here, run by Department of International Relations, prepares these appointees. For months you sit there and you get prepared how to be a good diplomat. So that even if you are a political appointee, that particular process of proficiency is a matter that is dealt with. it ought not, this particular incident, it should not serve as an obstacle to any process that we need towards restoring good relations with the United States. I think I'm quite sure that Ibrahim Rasool himself would recognize this, that as a diplomat, you don't represent yourself. You can't say this is my personal opinion. I'm speaking in my private capacity. There's no private capacity. Agenda 2063, you know that it's being implemented in terms of decades. The first decade of Agenda 2063 was 2014 to 2023. That's been done. There's a report that has been prepared as to whether it has achieved the targets that it has set at the beginning of that decade. It's a continental program. That particular report, as far as I can tell, doesn't actually go into detail to say the member states of the African Union contributed to these outcomes of 23 in the following ways. It doesn't. Maybe it can't be done like that. But I think we must bear in mind, in this context, the various elements that impact on this issue of the African economic development. One of them is this approach that the regional economic communities are important building blocks in terms of what we need to do with regard to African integration, African unity, and all of that. So I think that would be my starting point, to say with regard to Agenda 2063, during this first decade, what is it that our region contributed to the success of that first decade? Within which you can then ask the question, what did South Africa specifically do in that context? Unfortunately, part of what has happened in our country for some years now is that over a number of years, we have dismantled our Africa policy. The focus that historically, that as a democratic South Africa, the focus that we had on the African continent receded over the years. Yeah. And therefore, I think that as part of addressing this question, what did we do with regard to Agenda 2063, we must look at this question, how do we come back to have a real, genuine policy, an Africa policy, which drives our activities? We must go back to that. It relates to a larger question. Perhaps it relates to a question that was raised by Katlego with regard to the peace and security matter. Have we as Africans, as the African Union, assessed our own shortcomings with regard to that? I'm saying this question I was raising now about our contribution to 2063 and the role and Africa policy. I think you can see this, that part of what has happened, for whatever reason, the quality of political leadership on the continent has declined. And that has included a reduction in the intensity of this feeling of a Pan-African feeling. And you see its impact practically. For instance, if you take the decisions taken by the UN Security Council in 2011 about Libya. The African Union had taken certain positions about how to handle Libya, including no military interventions, and sent the resolution to the Security Council. A week later, Security Council went directly against that AU position. And as you know what happened there, NATO invaded, Gaddafi was killed, the Libyan state was destroyed. Directly contrary to what the African leadership had said. To this day, the problems of Libya are still unresolved. Africa appoints a special envoy to join these others in trying to sort out the problems in Libya. I'm talking about a specific person whose name I shall not mention, who actually abandoned that job. He walked away. And the reason he walked away was because you have all of these people who are active, from the United Nations, from the Arab League, and they would hold meetings without him. He was just an addendum there that is forgotten. Yeah. So in the end, he left. He abandoned that job. Yeah. But it was a statement about, I'm saying that where you have a situation where an African, a very, very important African view is ignored about an African country. And the rest of the world acts about this African country without regard to whatever these Africans are saying. It tells you something about what has happened in terms of the standing of the African continent internationally and the standing of its leadership. I think there has been a movement backwards with regard to that. It's also reflected here in this country, among ourselves. So now I'm talking about a movement backwards away from Pan-Africanism, that engagement in the continent. I'm talking also about ourselves. It's something that we need to address, which would help us in terms of measuring what kind of impact do we have as a country with regard to programs like Agenda 2063. I am not aware of any particular engagement in terms of the African Union to deal with its shortcomings with regard to issues of peace and security. That kind of assessment, I don't know if it has been, maybe it has. But it's again very visible. You have a war that breaks out in Ethiopia between the central government, federal government, Addis Ababa, against one of the states, Tigray. 2020, don't run. Anyway, breaks out. I happen to chair the African Union Subcommittee on the Horn of Africa. So we then decided as that committee to talk to the African Peace and Security Council, to say to them, as this panel on the Horn of Africa, we can't move forward until this conflict among the Ethiopians is resolved. So please, PSC, Peace and Security Council, do your job as mandated by the Constitutive Act of the African Union, the African Peace and Security Architecture. Do what you have to do to solve this thing, and then as a panel on the Horn, we'll be able to do our work. The then current chair of the Peace and Security Council replied to me after he had finished his term as the chair. And he says to me, thank you very much for your report. And then the important question that you raised. Please raise that question with my successor. And the reality of the matter is that the African Union Peace and Security Council would not discharge its responsibilities with regard to working to end that conflict in Ethiopia. They walked away from it. Until very late in a particular way, when President Obasanjo was appointed as the envoy of the chair of the commission, not even a chair of the PSC, it's the chair of the commission, the envoy of the commission, of the chair of the commission. But I'm saying effectively the Peace and Security Council had walked away from its responsibilities to deal with the conflict in Ethiopia. You have the conflict currently taking place in Sudan. There is a subcommittee of the African Union which was appointed to deal with the Sudanese issue. It's led by a very good African, very good person. But the Sudanese are not listening. So there is actually no engagement of the African Union with the conflict in Sudan. Or you have the situation in the Sahel, where now you have this alliance of Sahel states, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, that have broken away from ECOWAS because of the way the ECOWAS responded after there was a coup in Niger. They've walked out. That regional economic community, ECOWAS, of course, is weaker by that fact. It's a matter of concern, must be a matter of concern to the African Union. But it's nowhere to be seen. Or you get the conflict in Somalia. The latest report I received about that, I have no way of verifying it, but I believe the reporters. They say Al-Shabaab, instead of getting weakened, is actually getting stronger. Coming very close to Mogadishu. The African Union, in my view, ought to be sitting and saying, an intervention force was established and it's been there, so Uganda and all that. What's happening? This suggests to me that we've got to come back to the point of saying there has to be a political solution with regard to the conflict in Somalia, not a military one. I don't know where the AU is with regard to that. Or take the matter of this conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I think I've said this before in one of our meetings here. That conflict in the DRC is a domestic Congolese conflict. There's a view that is taken hold among some people that is a conflict which have impacts on the sovereignty of the Congo. And therefore there's some outside force. When you talk about peace in the DRC, about ending this intervention by some outside force, no. The conflict in the Congo is fundamentally a conflict among the Congolese people. And derives from the fact that there's a section of the population of the Congo in the eastern Congo, which the government in Kinshasa does not want to recognize as Congolese. This is the Rwanda-speaking population. During Mobutu's years, Mobutu said, these are not Congolese, drive them back to Rwanda. You even had a militia formed in the Eastern Congo, one they called, for instance, Mai Mai. Those years. Not Mai Mai in Komboti, but Mai Mai. With a specific task to drive out these Congolese-speaking Rwandans, these Rwandan-speaking Congolese, to drive them out into the Congo, into Rwanda. And that's why the M23 gets formed. Because the Rwandan-speaking Congolese say the government is not protecting us, we must protect ourselves. I don't know where the particular conflict is going to end, but again, what I hear from the Congolese is that in reality, today, 70% of the population of the Congo supports the M23. Because they are saying the country as a whole, for some reason, has developed a hostile attitude towards the government in Kinshasa. So what we might very well see is this rebellion among the Congolese against their own government. Again, I'm trying to answer the question, where was the AU? I don't know where it was. So there are those shortcomings. And I hope that with the election now of a new commission of the Peace and Security Council, which was done a few days ago, that indeed the reconstitution of the Commission of the African Union would create the possibility to have a relook at these matters, to have the assessment that you are talking about, to identify the shortcomings and decide what is to be done. I agree with you that in terms of the G20 and our chairing of the G20, it would be important to put on the agenda of the G20 the matter of this, the debt trap to which you referred. Because indeed it is a serious problem. Okay. It is a serious problem that needs to be addressed, including this matter about the reform of the financial architecture. That's an important issue of the World Bank, of the Bretton Woods institutions. That's an important matter, needs to be put on the agenda of the G20, in addition to the debt trap issue, so that indeed, if a common position can be elaborated coming out of the G20 with regard to that financial architecture, it would be important. And I would add to that an important matter for us as Africans, in addition to the issue of the financial architecture, which is the issue of the loss of huge volumes of resources through illicit financial outflows. That is an important matter that needs to be addressed by the G20. Because when these resources flow out of the continent as illicit outflows, they end up somewhere. And in many instances, they end up being hosted by some of the countries who are part of the G20. So to take a G20 common position to say, what do we do to combat this very negative phenomenon of these illicit financial flows, which impact very badly on the developing countries, not only Africa. which must include the issue of the elimination of the tax havens. If the G20 can take a common position on those issues and act on them, it would help. Because, for instance, if you take us on the African continent here, the continent loses something in the order of $90 billion a year through illicit financial flows. And we need money to invest in infrastructure, to build schools, to do clinics and all of that. But 90 billion every year goes out of the country, out of the continent, as illicit outflow. So I'm saying that if the G20 can take a common position on this, so that there is action, it would help enormously on our continent in terms of in addition to that, those issues of the financial architecture. So, the program director, I think I've answered all the questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. I want to thank our panel for introducing the themes that the President spoke about. And I think we can give them a nice round of applause. I'm going to ask them to exit the stage, but not leave us, because we want to have tea with you afterwards and a photo opportunity. Because what I now want to do is invite the audience. This is your turn to talk. And I want to arrange it like this. It's quite a big hall. I want to prioritize our UNISA students first. I want to give you the opportunity to raise your hand and ask a question or make a comment or a statement. Tell us who you are, what you study or have studied, and put a statement or a question, but you have to keep it short and sharp, because I think there are several of us who want to do the same. In another round, we are going to come to guests and friends who are also in the audience. I don't know, Vice Chancellor, if we are online, if there are people who want to ask those questions, but the technicians can maybe support us by giving us the messages. We're streaming live. Okay, all right. We'll play it by ear. And I want to ask, let me also be provocative, our ambassadors who are sitting here in front of us, plus the Dean. Yes, Welile, Ambassador, we want to hear from you as well. You have wisdom and you have very deep experience of what the President has been talking about. We want to hear your voice. You are now at the educational institution where we want to learn from you. So feel free to make a comment, add to the depth of the conversation. So let me start at the far end, the block over there. I can see a hand of a woman in black and white. You're number 1. That block is done. I'm coming to this block G here. I see no hands. Oh, okay, if you want to ask a question, just stand up in that block. Yes, you are number 2, sir. You're number 2. Stand. In white, number 3, and in blue, number 4. Did I miss somebody? She's number 5, and you are number 6. I might have to come back again. So we've got 6 already. I'll take one more block. This block here called F. No, you can't all stand up now. So right at the end, in light gray, where are we now? Number 8. Is it number 8? No, your hand can't be up. Number 8. In the white t-shirt, number 9. In the orange top, number 10. I'm going to stop there. Okay, then with the Palestinian scarf, number 11. I stop there. So remember your number. I'm going to ask our assistant, with the microphones. There we go. You're going to go from one number to the next. Let's not waste any time. Tell us who you are, what you've studied or busy studying, and put your question, please.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Masejo Solomons, and I am a BCom law student. And unfortunately, I didn't study I'm not studying at UNISA, but I am planning to.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, you're welcome.
Yes. My question, Mr. President, truly, I think, let me just speak from the heart. I am a 23-year-old who's burdened by my own potential. I am looking to further my education, but also just be a portal and an agent of change. I think truly, I am struggling to find the spaces in which we can, I myself can be, I can engage in such rigorous work, in such thought-provoking intellectual leadership work. And truly, I cannot sit and rot away with my potential. My question truly is, sir, where are the spaces for people who are like me? I sit with so much potential, so much intellectual capacity that truly I cannot rot away.
Okay.
Thank you.
You will come and register here. Number 2.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dr. Ibrahim Ekamba Stephen, and I'm from DRC. And my question is regarding the conflict in the Eastern DRC. I was born in the Eastern DRC, and I did all my studies in South Africa, BA and honors here at UNISA, and my PhD and master's at University of Pretoria. Now, my question, this is the second time I hear the president saying the conflict in the Eastern DRC is more of a Congolese conflict. I just want to ask a question and also make a comment. The comment number 1 is that the report of United Nations have indicated that Rwanda is supporting non-state armed groups in the Eastern DRC. Does the president understand that aspect of that conflict? That's the first question. Question number 2, the M23.
How many questions do you have?
I only have 2.
Okay.
Thank you. The M23 claim to defend the interest of a Tutsi ethnic group in the DRC. These are Congolese or Rwanda origin in the DRC. Now, I wanted to indicate that in the DRC, we have 2 types of Congolese or Rwanda origin, both the Tutsis and the Hutus. And these Hutus, they are actually more than the Tutsis in the DRC, all of them from Rwanda. Now, when the M23 claim they are defending the interests of the Tutsis in the DRC, and that DRC has more than 450 ethnic groups. The question is, what are the rights of this Tutsi ethnic group in the DRC, and how about the rest of other ethnic groups in the DRC that are not taking arms against the government that they are claiming their rights? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Before we go to number 3, some people have phones, cell phones with cameras and flashlights. So when we sit here on the stage, it is bothering us in the eyes. So please put it off. We've tried before. We don't want to throw you out. We'll ask our Congolese colleague to throw you out. The other thing I want to say is I appreciate long statements or political analysis, but I think it's nice to have a variety of questions and comments. So let's try and keep it short and sharp. UNISA has platforms for engagement. It's not only today. At the TM school, and we have conferences. We will engage in future. Number 3.
Good afternoon. My name is Zianda Msaki. Just like the first speaker, I recently completed my master's degree in development studies, but unfortunately, not fortunately, maybe not unfortunately, from the University of Johannesburg. And my question is with regards to the conflict that is happening in the DRC. If my memory serves me correctly, in 2024, the Parliament of the EU had called for an end to the memorandum of understanding that the EU had with regards to with Rwanda with regards to its 3Ts mineral complex that they import from Rwanda, citing the fact that these minerals are largely found in the Congo and Rwanda does not have them. My question is whether or not, with the absence of the AU and its Peace and Security Council in the African continent, we're seeing this in the Sahel, in Rwanda, in the Great Lakes, are we then leaving a vacuum for the EU and organizations like the EU to come in and to exploit the conflict situations that exist in the continent? Thank you.
Thank you very much. An excellent question. The number 4, I think, or number next.
Good afternoon, former President Thabo Mbeki. My name is Uzi. My surname is Koza. I'm currently a master's student here in UNISA. Now, the question that I want to pose is directly directed to former President Thabo Mbeki. And the question is, as a way of healing the rift between the United States and South Africa, don't you think that for South African government to withdraw the case against Israel from the ICC, that will heal, or should I say, it's a point of departure to heal this broken relationship?
You meant the ICJ, ne? Or the ICC? ICJ, yeah. I wonder which college you are from. Number 6.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, former president. Nervous. But this is a very strange ask, but yeah, I'm gonna grow courage. Can you please be my grandfather? The reason I ask is that I would like to immense in your knowledge, especially since I'm currently doing my master's degree in veterinary science with UP, but I'm graduating this year at the side. I'm currently pursuing a research on antimicrobial use in the Gauteng dairy sector and its contribution to antimicrobial resistance. So AMR has become such a major challenge, not just in agriculture, but also in public health and food security across Africa. I'm passionate about bridging a gap between research and policies. Given your leadership in shaping African development strategies, what advice would you give to a young researcher like me, and who's more interested into fusing policies and scientific research into a real driven change? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I think that block, is that block done? There's one more.
Good morning, Mr. President, the former president. Good evening, Mr. President, I'm so sorry. I'm Matepe Patlani, and I'm currently studying international relations. I'm doing my final year, hoping to be doing my advanced studies by the TM school. So my question to the former president would be, I would like to describe the GNU as a polygamous marriage, right? So what would he have done differently if he was president by this time? And what is his take on the level of unemployment in this country? And what does he think the solution is to the problem that we have and are facing as the youth? Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, for acknowledging me. I'd like to greet the former President Mbeki and to observe all protocol. My name is Ben Timunya. I studied here in UNISA for a BCom. I only ended up at second year. And then I got an opportunity at the Gauteng Nurses College for a 4-year diploma. And then now I'm a private nurse. And then we recently got land through the government redistribution land here in Gauteng. And then I'm a beef producer. So I'm going to speak about the AGOA issue.
Okay.
Because it's gonna affect me in future. I know South Africa to be a thriving country, short history. In the 2000s, we were very much better when you look at the rate of the rand towards the dollar. It was around 8 rand. And then later on, there was a financial crisis, the global financial crisis. And then most South African companies survived. America was like almost collapsing. And then, but now when you look at America and South Africa, we are struggling a lot more than them. And then now they are pulling these tactics and okay, it's fine. Then when you look at the AGOA and how the conditions are, we stand to lose. And then when you also look at the diplomatic conditions, there's this matter between the diplomat and the country, America. So I heard Mr. President saying that the way the diplomat handled it, he doesn't advise it because when you are a guest, you shouldn't behave like that towards your host. I agree. But now, towards that engagement, there was also a frustration from the ambassador that he's trying to reach out to the top government officials in America and they wouldn't listen to him. They were listening to AfriForum and the DA. So my question now is that, where do we draw the line between being diplomatic or looking like beggars or also voicing out and also determining our own future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're still with this block. Yeah, there's 1 or 2 last hands, 3 in fact. Yes, sir.
Yes, good day. My name is Neo Musi. I am a postgrad student at VETS doing finance, and I apologize for UNISA students that I'm not part of their campus. My question is on the possibility of Cape independence and Vlokstad. And I fear that the South African leaders are not cognizant of the past of colonial agendas. In the 1800s, there was a German explorer who said that he discovered the Shona people in the Great Zimbabwe. And the idea of it was that they wanted to create the lost white tribe of Africa. In the whole history of colonization, it's only here in the southern tip of Africa that The colonizer wanted to indigenize themselves, and the agenda continues. Phil Craig, as we speak now, is in the United States, lobbying people to fulfill a colonial agenda. Is there a possibility of Vlokstad or Cape Independence in South Africa? And if there is, what should the South African youth do about it? Thank you.
Just before you go, just repeat your last question, your last sentence.
What should the South African youth do about the Cape Independence of Vlokstad agenda?
What should the youth do?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. What should the youth do about that? You know, VC, I must say the sound system is not working in our favor. We might want to upgrade it. I know they try hard. Yes.
Hello, everybody.
I've got some advice for the students who are asking questions. You just do this a little. Yeah, that's too much. A little bit up, that's it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Miladi Tovejani Maiwashe. I'm a master's in economics student at the University of Limpopo.
Which university?
Of Limpopo. Yes, it's been...
It's too far now. You must bring the mic.
Okay.
That's it. There you go.
Yes. Is this okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my question is an economic question. I'm asking about, respectfully, inflation targeting in South Africa. Is it still the right thing at this point in time? Because we have seen the Reserve Bank leverage measures against the consumer for actions that are perpetuated by the supplier, to the point whereby now the majority of the population is under a lot of crippling debt and small businesses cannot develop. So that is my question. Secondly, my last question is that as a request from for the school, that can we please also prioritize as thought leaders measures other than interest rate targeting to combat inflation? Thanks.
What measures can we take?
Yeah, no. Good evening.
Cheese, this thing.
Oh, yes. Good evening to everybody, His Excellency. My name is Orapele Matsidiso. I'm an alumni of the school. Of course, in 2019, I graduated Good Governance in Africa. But currently, I just recently graduated Masters with the University of Johannesburg in Development Studies. My question are two quickly. One, His Excellency, don't you think that African Union, in order to resuscitate the Pan-Africanist agenda, needs to reconsider its decision to merge the Political Affairs Department with the Peace and Security Department? Perhaps maybe one should say, as a comment, maybe that should be demeasured, and some of you as the former heads of states be advisory committee or council of that particular political affairs to resuscitate back the Pan-Africanist agenda. The last question, His Excellency, is with respect to the question that you asked last year, I think in this house, whether we had read the Nugent report on SARS. I want to pose the question in the light of what is happening with regard to the budget that has to be presented and adopted in National Parliament. Do you think the government has made efforts to implement the recommendation of the Nugent report on SARS, particularly on 4 key areas? The amendment of the SARS Act to appoint the Deputy SARS Commissioner, 2, the re-establishment of the Compliance Committee, 4, the 3, the establishment of the High-Level Integrity Unit. Lastly, the appointment of independent general within that. Do you think if, of course, the government could have implemented the recommendations of that report, we would have collected at least enough to avert the current increase of value-added tax? Thank you very much.
This should be the last question for this round. So, yes, sir.
Sorry? Yeah. Good evening, compatriots. Good evening, Your Excellency. Thank you so much for the insightful lecture. My question really is on, firstly, the issue of Zimbabwe, Your Excellency. For a long time, there's been criticism that South Africa is not handling the issue of Zim as well as it should. So what is to be done about that to resolve the issues in Zim, because they have an impact on South Africa? The second question is, I think, the missed opportunity of SADC as a regional bloc, in particular given what is happening, the geopolitics and so on, the relationship with the United States. I think it's about time that South Africa in particular, as well as neighboring countries, really begin to consolidate and create a more powerful and consolidated regional bloc for our own political and economic purposes. Thank you so much.
Let's just pause for a minute, colleagues. We've had questions around 8 or 9 different themes. We want the President to respond. We've only dealt with one half of the audience. And I'm looking at the clock, it's 5:15. I'm consulting with the acting dean who's coming to my side, whether we take another round and for how long. But I also want to say, there's a trick that you are doing. When you start to ask the question, you add another one. Some even 3. We need to keep it shorter. And I'm going to ask Prof. Edith just to guide us here.
Just do 1, 2, 3, 4 in the next session.
That's nice. She's given me a formula, which I will reveal later. President Mbeki, would you like to respond to some of these questions, some or all? I can summarize for you, but I don't think...
Yeah, I hope I heard all of them.
Yeah, if you miss important one out.
You will, okay.
I'll take him the platform.
With regard to these the questions on the Congo, I have absolutely no doubt that Rwanda is very keenly interested in what's happening in the Congo, for 2 reasons. One of them is the one we've been talking about, which is the presence of a Rwandan-speaking population on the Congo, in the Congo, which is a matter of the drawing of the colonial borders. The colonial masters draw a line, and some Rwandan-speaking people are on this side of that line and that side of the line. I think it would be unnatural for Rwanda not to be interested in what's happening to the Rwandan-speaking people across the border. Secondly, as we all know, some of the people who committed genocide in Rwanda in 1994 ran into the Eastern Congo, where they still are to this day. The FDLR. who say that one of their tasks is to overthrow the government of Rwanda. That's the second reason that Rwanda would be interested in the Congo. So I have absolutely no doubt that the Rwanda is very interested in what's happening in the Eastern Congo. What they do practically in terms of interventions and so on, I don't know. Except in instances where the government in Kinshasa has actually authorized that the Rwandan army can come in to deal with the FDLR. I haven't heard of any other ethnic group in the Congo which has suffered the same fate as the Tutsi population in the Eastern Congo. One of the colleagues was saying, what about the other ethnic groups? I haven't heard. I'm not Congolese, maybe the Congolese would know better than I do. Of any other ethnic group that has suffered the same fate, as a consequence of which it takes a decision that it must protect itself. The EU, the question we mentioned about the EU and what the EU does towards Rwanda, I'm sure is correct. I've heard of other countries taking what particular posture towards Rwanda. The basic question I'm raising is that you will not solve the problem, the conflict of the Congo, unless you deal fundamentally with this domestic issue. When the Congolese met here and sat in Sun City and negotiated the Sun City Agreement, this was part of the discussion. The Congolese colleagues will remember that one of the formations that participated in the Sun City dialogue was an armed organization called the RCD. The RCD, sometimes people call it the Goma RCD. The RCD essentially represented that Banyamulenge population, accepted in these negotiations as part of the Congo. He participated in negotiations, and some of the decisions taken in the inter-Congolese dialogue were about the proper integration of that Banyamulenge population in the army, in government, and so on. You would find there's a resolution out of the inter-Congolese dialogue which deals with the issue of national minorities. The formal resolution at Sun City, the reason that that resolution was adopted was to deal with this question. So I'm saying the Congolese, when they met together, they recognized this problem exactly for what it is and dealt with it. And I'm quite sure that was also reflected in the constitution that was then decided upon based on the Sun City outcomes. Essentially, if we are genuinely interested in, well, let me just finish that story. After the Sun City negotiations concluded, and the Congolese took a particular position, the positions I'm explaining, this is how we are going to deal with ourselves as Congolese about our country. As I say, it reflected in the Constitution. We then thought it was also necessary to deal with this issue of the relationship between the DRC and Rwanda. So we hosted negotiations here in this city between President Joseph Kabila and President Paul Kagame. And we're saying to them, the Congolese have taken a particular position about how to sort out their own problems. You need to contribute to that as countries which neighbor each other. So they signed an agreement. And one of those agreements, the issues decided in that agreement was the government of the Congo would act to disarm the FDLR. Another part of that was Rwanda would withdraw its troops from the DRC. I'm sure you'd find that agreement on the internet, signed by the two presidents, because in our view, it was important both to solve this problem of the conflict among the Congolese by the Congolese, but it was also important that the neighborhood contributes to that solution. And that was why that agreement was signed. It didn't work. And the reason it didn't work was because in reality, the DRC government did not have the capacity to disarm the FDLR. So if you are on the Rwandan side of the borderline, you would say, but the FDLR problem has not been solved in terms of the signed agreement. Those are some of the realities here. We can go into more of these realities about that situation, but fundamentally, to resolve the conflict in the Congo, we've got to go back to the Congolese and say, what did you agree at Sun City? What did you put in your constitution as a result? What have you done about the things about which you agreed? I think that's what would help us to solve this problem. The matter of historically, the ANC has a relationship with the Palestinians, particularly through the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. Both these organizations were allies because they were confronted, they were both engaged in a struggle for national liberation. With the Palestinians involved in a struggle, recognizes it's in the United Nations decisions. The very first decision of the United Nations General Assembly, 1947, dealing with the creation of the two states, Jewish state, Palestinian state. This Palestinian state has not existed since then, to this day. The vision adopted by the United Nations I'm saying in 1947, when they took this decision to form the State of Israel, this idea of the formation of a Palestinian state is there. It's never happened. And indeed, the conditions, now, my view, the conditions for the establishment of this Palestinian state in Gaza and the West Bank and so on, those conditions have become eroded by the behavior of the Israeli government. The settlements on the West Bank, for instance, have taken away a lot of the land which had been part of that Palestinian state. I'm saying, therefore, that it was not a surprise that the South African government would take a position in defense of the Palestinians and criticize whatever the government of Israel was doing. Some years back, when I was still in government, we hosted a bilateral meeting between the Israelis and the Palestinians in a wine estate somewhere in the Western Cape. We sat with them for days to say, as representatives of these two communities, let's find a solution. And when there were military questions they were asking, we called in our National Defense Force to say, please help. If there were police matters, we'd call in the police service to say, please help. Because we were trying very hard to get these two to agree on how to settle this problem. So our intervention on this matter, it doesn't start with the case in the International Court of Justice. You've had prime ministers of Israel. Ehud Barak, before he became prime minister, came here. We discussed with him. Yeah. The prime minister of Israel was assassinated, Yitzhak Shamir. We were in contact with him. After the decision taken in Oslo, which led to the birth of the Palestinian Authority, was in touch with us to say this is what they've agreed. And he personally was very committed to make sure that these things happens. Because we have to solve this problem of the relations between the Israelis, the Jewish population, and the Palestinians. And therefore, the matter of the Palestinian state was very important, which is why he was assassinated. We're engaged with them. I'm saying that we are not new to this question. And consistently, what we have sought is to encourage an agreement between these two sides, so that indeed what was visualized in the 1947 resolution of the General Assembly is accomplished. And therefore, it's I don't think our attitude with regard to the matter of a just resolution of the conflict, which must address the fundamental interest of the Palestinian people, in the same way that the protection of the Israel and so on is also very important, our positions on those things won't change. So in practical sense, even if South Africa decided that they're withdrawing their intervention in the ICJ, that won't end the case. That case is already with the International Court of Justice, and the Court of Justice will proceed with what it has to do. But fundamentally, I'm saying that, the positions we've taken over many years on the Palestinian question, the same positions as when President Clinton was there, President Bush was there, Bush Senior, Bush Junior, President Trump when he was in the first term, the same positions. And I'm sure that we are not going to change those positions. And indeed, I think everybody, all of us need to join hands to say the rights of the Palestinian people must be respected. I really don't know what anybody expects South Africa to do with regard to Zimbabwe. After the elections in Zimbabwe, I can't remember now the exact year, but there were elections, presidential elections, when you had something like 22 or 23 presidential candidates. What year was that? And then you have these elections, and President Mnangagwa is elected president of Zimbabwe. He then called on all of the parties which had presented presidential candidates to come together to form some kind of political collective to discuss the future of Zimbabwe. And indeed, that formation emerged, The weakness with it was that some of the parties that had candidates did not participate. One of the results of that particular presidential election was that there were two of the candidates who, between the two of them, got 95% of the votes. It's the President Emmerson Mnangagwa and Nelson Chamisa. Between the two of them, they had 95% of the presidential vote. The other 21 parties shared the other 5%. So this formation that President Mnangagwa called for, parties that had the candidates must come together. Chamisa's party did not participate, plus 1 or 2 or 3, 4 others. So now one of the demands that is being put forward by Zimbabwe, correctly, is the lifting of sanctions that have been imposed on Zimbabwe to create better space for the Zimbabweans to address their own development challenges. Particularly in sanctions imposed by the United States. So, I know many of the players, political players in Zimbabwe. So I went to see President Mnangagwa to say to him, President, I agree. We need these sanctions lifted. But part of what needs to happen, is that you Zimbabweans need to speak with one voice. Our colleague also raised this question about the need for Africa to make sure that it works as a bloc, to say that you as Zimbabweans need to speak with one voice on this matter, apart from any other consideration. And therefore, it seemed to me that one of the things that needs to happen is that these two parties, which had 95% of the presidential votes, need to get together to talk about the future of Zimbabwe. So that even on this matter, when we approach the rest of the world to say lift sanctions, it must be said by both. Agreed, we agreed. Yeah. Just get together and sort out these problems. And to cut a long story short, that meeting never took place. Yeah. I don't know if it's still relevant now, that kind of approach. But we were intervening as South Africans, as good neighbors, to say from our reading of the situation in Zimbabwe, this is what we thought we should do. I'm saying it did not produce any results. I don't know now what would be expected of South Africa with regard to Zimbabwe. I'm quite certain that the Zimbabweans themselves are very much aware of the fact that they need to get together as Zimbabweans to discuss whatever it is that constitute the fundamental problems facing the country. And I think indeed that the Zimbabweans must be given space to do that themselves. I don't know specifically, the question that is raised very specifically, whether our government or the GNU has done the things that were recommended by the GNU, by the New Gen Commission on the South African Revenue Service. I really honestly don't know whether any of those things have been done. But the point I want to make with regard to that is the larger question I was raising about the New Gen Commission report is this. that commission makes a very critically important statement about South Africa. And that statement is that there's a group of people in our country who are very, very determined to make sure that the democratic experiment fails. And they intervened in this matter of SARS to make sure that you cut down the revenues that are available to the state so that it can pay civil servants, it can pay the army, it can pay it would collapse. And that's what Nugent demonstrates practically, what was done. And indeed, the reason the Nugent Commission was appointed was exactly because the revenues accruing to the states were diminishing because of the success of that intervention. That's what rang the alarm bells. This South African Revenue Service, which is so efficient in the past, all of a sudden, is very inefficient. Smaller and smaller revenues accruing to the state because of a conscious intervention to destroy the South African Revenue Service. I'm saying that the Nugent Commission report points to this reality of the intervention of the counter-revolution in this country to destroy the democratic experiment. And there are other interventions that it made. With it, part of the reason we've got this economic crisis and so on. The reason, for instance, you have the failure of the state corporations. This story that is told is because of deployment of comrades to positions because they have no qualifications, but they are cadres. It's wrong. The destruction of the state corporations was a systematic process done by exactly the same people who intervened in SARS, as Nugent explains. And that problem persists. And part of what concerns me is that it seems to me many of our people are not listening. For instance, last year, we said, given the problems our country faces, we need a national dialogue. Meaning a national dialogue that let the people of South Africa come together and say, this is the South Africa we want, this is the South Africa we don't want. Without mediation of political parties or anything. Let the people themselves talk and determine their own destiny. I thought the matter was agreed. I think it's even in the documents of the GNU, we agree. But nothing is moving. Why? Because there are people who don't want that national dialogue to take place. It's because they've got their own agenda for South Africa, which is very, very different from the agenda that would come from the people of South Africa speaking for themselves. So today, many people ask, but President, you called for this thing months ago, and it was agreed. Why is nothing moving? I'm saying nothing is moving because, my view, there are other people who don't want it to happen. And I'm hoping that this matter will get sorted out. The lessons from the Nugent Commission indeed are about the specific amendments to changes to the SARS Act and all that is mentioned. But more fundamental is that we must confront this reality. That there were people in this country who don't want this democracy to succeed. And they intervened in very specific ways, like spelled out in the SARS Nugent Commission, in order to make sure this democracy fails. And I'm hoping that what was visualized as a national dialogue does not fall victim to that kind of negative intervention. Indeed, I must say that when I've at some point spoken about some of the issues raised by some of our Afrikaner compatriots when they talk about alienation in the society, I've said the best place to discuss those matters is in the national dialogue. Instead of people going to Washington to say you are being whatever, they must come to the national dialogue and make that presentation. And so that we, as all of us as South Africans, we can then discuss that. If you say, my cultural rights as an African are being denied, say it in the national dialogue and produces evidence so that all of us as South Africans can then say, well, what is to be done? Because the answer to the question, what is to be done, will not come from Washington. It must come from here. So during the negotiations, we addressed, as the colleague would know, in a very, very detailed manner, this demand for a folk state. It was addressed in a very comprehensive manner. It includes, for instance, with regard to the elections in 1994, based on the 1993 Constitution, there's an agreement that part of the results of those elections would be used in order to assess whether objectively conditions exist for the establishment of a folk state. It's a specific agreement. Elections took place, and everybody agreed, including the Afrikaners, that the election results, the voice of the people of South Africa, black and white, said there's no place for a folk state. There was no way you could, there was no way you could say this particular area is a folk state. So I'm saying the matter was raised, was discussed. The demand for Afrikaner self-determination, which was very much part of those negotiations. That matter was discussed, was negotiated, as a result of which there's actually a constitutional provision which provides for self-determination for all of the people of South Africa, not just Afrikaners. So the matter was addressed. That's what I'm saying, that if there is anybody among the Afrikaner community who still thinks there's a problem, the place to discuss us is in national dialogue. The danger with the position that is being taken, as reflected in what seems to have been said in the United States, is that you create a situation where the suggestion is the country must not undertake this task of the eradication of the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. Because if you do that, you threaten Afrikaner interests. You can't say we must not act to change the country away from that past in order to preserve what is said to be rights of the Afrikaners. You can't say that. I'm saying the danger of it is that you then, if you take this particular group of white South Africans and they set themselves aside, they've got particular interests which must block change in South Africa. you are creating conditions of mutual hostility. The black oppressed will say, you want us to continue to live with this heritage of apartheid and colonialism, and you maintain whatever advantage you had as a result of that system. That's unsustainable. It's very, very dangerous to create a situation where there might be conflict of that kind. And yet I'm saying that the place is there for these problems to be addressed by South Africans as a whole. A national dialogue must include the possibility for these Afrikaners, like anybody else, to come and present their own case. And let us as South Africans together discuss those. The GNU is our government. Whatever we think of it, it's a government. And as the government, it must help to solve the problems that are facing the country. We've got huge levels of unemployment. We've got huge levels of poverty, a very stark situation of racial inequalities, gender inequalities. Those are real problems. And this only government we have, the GNU, must address those issues. Whether it can, I don't know. But it's got an obligation. If it says we are the government of South Africa, what's the government of South Africa do? Government of South Africa must address those issues. The issue of combating inflation, clearly the colleague is correct, it can't just be a matter of the Reserve Bank moving interest rates up and down. It fundamentally is a question that we were raising earlier when the matter about VAT and fiscal matters was raised. We've got to attend to this problem, that effectively the South African economy is stagnant. Whether it's growing annually at 0.8 or something, effectively stagnant. What that means, proportionately, is that our people are getting poorer every day. Critically, the matter of the regeneration of the South African economy becomes important. And this happened in the past. The statisticians, for instance, will say at some point, maybe 2004, 2005, 2006, thereabouts, this economy was growing at the rate of about 5% a year. It was under an ANC government. So the argument that we are incapable of managing a modern economy is nonsense. The things that must be done, the things that must be done about the economy must be done. I was saying earlier, we can't avoid the notion, the implementation of the concept of a social compact. That is part of what needs to be done in order to address the issue of inflation. I should have acknowledged also Our Lady, the beekeeper. Maybe that's one of the ways of addressing inflation, is to produce honey. In terms of our diplomacy, sure, we can't be beggars. South Africa cannot behave as a beggar under any circumstance. We've got to engage whoever we have to engage, but not in the sense of coming to beg anybody. We have a population here which is not used to begging. This population which fought to defeat the apartheid regime, it did not beg. People are ready to sacrifice their lives in order to bring about change. So if you had a government that went to this population to say, we've got to beg somebody else for something, they would never understand what you are talking about. So the question that's raised by two of our colleagues, how does one become an agent for change? I've got this particular specialization. I'm very interested in matters about food security. I'm an accountant. I've got that particular skill, but I should not just earn a salary. But this skill must help to change the government, to change the country for the better. What do I need to do in order to intervene to change this country for the better? In food security, accountancy, whatever. I would say to, fortunately, in the hall we have the chairperson of council of UNISA and the vice chancellor and principal. For the students of UNISA, they must pose those questions to those two. We've got the skills. We want to make a positive impact on the transformation of our society. How do we do that? That's the question. And I'm sure the university would help to answer that question. To see how its own students, its own graduates, they intervene to change this country for the better. I think that's a matter that also needs to be addressed by our political parties. So I can only speak not on behalf, but as a member of one of the political parties. In our case, I think we're so preoccupied with what to do with ourselves that I doubt if we would have time to address that question. But it's a question that must be addressed even by the political parties. What is it that they suggest should be done by these South Africans who are very ready to act as agents of change? So I'm not answering that question myself, because I think there are other people who are better empowered to do that. Anthony, that's all the questions.
Colleagues, I want to take the temperature of the room. I want to understand if there's any last burning question that has not been raised before. I'm going to take 2 hands. That lady there in the black and white, if you can stand up. That's number 1. Number 2, right here, right here.
Oh, okay.
Stand up. Right, yes, you're number 2. Remember, the President also suggested that the Vice Chancellor might want to say something. And I gave an opportunity to our ambassadors to make an input, a small input. I know, Ambassador Welile, you tend to make speeches. No, you want to make a short input for us. You are number 3, and then we are finished. Yes, because of the time, colleagues. Can we have number 1, please?
Okay, number 1 you can make it.
Yes, please.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Thabo. I am a BCom Law graduate from the University of South Africa, proudly.
and I work for a law firm. I've worked for more than 3 law firms. So my question is based on debt and finances. We graduate, we get jobs, and we want to be the change that we see from our ministers and our president. So my question is, what attitude and actions about money can we as graduates trying our best to generate wealth adopt?
Can you repeat that question for the benefit of the president?
Okay. What attitude and actions about money can we as graduates trying our best to build generational wealth adopt? The reason I'm asking this question is we recently started a property stokvel, and we are seeing that as much as we are trying, we might have the wrong attitudes or actions towards personal finance.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a nice question. Number 2.
Thank you, Program Director. Okay. Good evening.
Yeah,
it is? Yes. My name is Gemi Matato, and I am the founder of SQR Audit. It's an audit firm based here in Pretoria. For quotations or requests for proposals, you can visit our site on www.sqrbusiness.co.za. Okay. So the question to my president is on the state capture, and because we are still under state capture, my president, and the audit failures that are continuous. There's no improvement in Parliament. What structural changes would you recommend, my president, to ensure that our audit reports from the AG have tangible consequences that are managed for non-compliance by our political leaders? Following up on that, what lessons can we within the public sector, because, well, I'm a business, but I specialize with the public sector. What can we learn from the private sector auditing practices? And I'm coming in with this from the recent Steinhoff saga. Where is Marcus Euste? Is he coming back? Thank you.
Yes. I thought he was passed on. Okay.
Thank you.
Ambassador Willile Nhlapo, the word is yours. Thank you. Yeah, you make the speech on Monday. Ntabi saying? We're getting you another one.
No, thank you very much. No, I was consulting with my colleagues there. Former ambassadors. After listening attentively to what the president was saying and answering questions, we are prepared to avail ourselves to any students who want to do their honors or doctorates on the subjects that the questions have been asked. No, because we're there on the ground. We're there on the ground and we're ready to do it because the reports that we had written at the time, they've now been declassified, some of them. The challenge we're faced with is that researchers from the US and everywhere else, they come across those reports.
Yes.
They want us to confirm and elaborate.
Yes.
And this is criminal because this is South African intellectual property. So you invested in us, use us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ambassador. You're speaking to my heart. President Mbeki, there were only 2 issues really, or 3 that came up. Would you like to tackle them now? And because we can then conclude with this part of the program. Yeah. The lady is saying, if I run a stokvel, do I have the attitude, the approach, the belief system, the understanding to actually make a difference? And the lady, towards wealth creation. Do we have that DNA in us to do that? And the lady here is saying, what has happened to the forensic audit and the consequences of state capture? In short.
Yeah, I was going to say with regard to lessons, for instance, about the failure of Steinhoff and all of that. Those sorts of lessons. The other report I would recommend with regard to that is a very, very good report that was done. The Commission of Inquiry was actually appointed by the apartheid regime. We inherited it. I think the issue was called the master bond, whatever. It had to do with a crooked scheme with some Afrikaner business people, very crooked, robbed the public of a lot of money. And that particular report, very important in terms of its assessment of the auditing profession, because it explained in detail how the accountants and the auditors had facilitated that process of theft. So that even if the actuality of the finances of a particular company are going like this, the accountants write the opposite. They say the finances are going the opposite direction. I think that's one of the big lessons. I think that's one of the big lessons that we need to learn, because I think the master bond, that is a commission makes a recommendation like that. Quite what was done by the government as a consequence of that, I can't remember. But it would be the same with all of these other things. The issue of state capture, for instance, there are the detailed matters that would be addressed. What happened in terms of ESCOM, what happens in terms of Transnet, and so on, the specific instances. But I think the fundamental question is, you have the state capture, in this instance, constituted in the possibility for a company actually to take control of an important sector of the state so that it could abuse the state for its own private purposes. The question is, how do we avoid that? It's entirely a political question. It's entirely a question of the quality of our politics. If you have anybody who sits in senior positions like government, and allows himself, herself, to be captured by the private sector, to be then used by the private sector for public benefit, there's something fundamentally wrong with the politics of that person. It's somebody we should never have elected. But I'm saying fundamentally that issue of state capture, it addresses that issue. It's a political issue, and I think it's related to what I was raising earlier about forces opposed to the success of the democratic experiment. If you take in this instance of that state capture, the Gupta brothers, When I'm sitting at home alone, I'm saying to myself, there is something improbable about this story. To have these three brothers come out of India, they are here in this country for a few days, well, not days, a few years. But during these few years, these new arrivals are so knowledgeable about South Africa that they can establish their tentacles in such a way that they actually succeed to do the damage they did. My view is they didn't act alone. There were South Africans who were working with them in partnership. You couldn't come as a foreigner like that, and suddenly you've got access even to children. Now I'm going to take this child and promote them. How do you know this child? There were people here in South Africa who were part of that scheme. Unfortunately, matter did not arise in the Zondo Commission to answer that question. What gave them the capacity to do things they did? With regard to the attitude, do we have the right attitude in terms of wealth creation? I'm sure we do. I'm sure we do. The lady, the beekeeper, demonstrates that. The other day at home, I was saying to one of my colleagues who works with us at home, I was saying to him that, can you please, it was on an afternoon, can you please go and get some fat cakes? Amakwenya. And he says to me, no, but President, you can't ask me that question now. So I say, why? He says, because it's clear you have not lived in a township for many years. Amakwenya are only available during the morning part of the day, not the afternoon. That's wealth creation. I think the instinct, our people have got the capacity to do that. And the question I think to ask is, have we created enough conditions to make this happen, including the provision of finances, affordable finances for a small business person, for instance? I think those are the questions, but I think in terms of attitude to do this, I think we have. The last person, Anthony, if you will allow him, last thing I'd like to say. We've been discussing the DRC. Important questions raised. I want to say welcome to General Mugwebi. General Mugwebi here is a retired officer of the National Defense Force, but he was the commander of the UN troops in the Congo. So if you want to know more about the Congo, that's the question to ask. Thanks a lot.
Just before I hand back to Professor Miller to conclude the proceedings, I want to say on the generous offer from the ambassadors and the general, our school will structure a mechanism. So if you're a student, you want to study and interview and ask, you must come to us. We'll make space for you. Thank you again very much. Darlene.
May I then just take this opportunity to congratulate this conversation community, because it's like a community now. People say that they come regularly to these discussions. The discussion is growing. And Patron and Chancellor and former President, We thank you from the depth of our hearts for this commitment that you make that is a testimony to your love for this country and its people, and that is endured through your entire life. Once you understood what politics was, of course. So thank you so much. We wish you a safe travels home. Be careful, and we thank you for your forbearance with this late ending. It's been a wonderful afternoon with you. Oh, the vote of thanks. I'm so sorry. My apologies.
As Prof. Sekwa is coming, can I request, we only have 5 minutes. Can we, even if you were rushing, can we just stay so that we conclude beautifully? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Program Director. I accept your apology. You are now, everybody wants to go home. Yeah, let me thank you for this opportunity. And let me also thank His Excellence, the Chancellor of UNISA, former President of South Africa, Dr. Thabo Mbeki, for really enlightening us and making this session to be so full of life. And I want to thank the chairperson of council, Dr. Den Musia, for being here to grace this occasion. I know that we had a council yesterday. He was supposed to have gone home, but he sacrificed. He said, I'm staying for this session. I am not going. Thank you so much, Chair. And also thank you to the council members who also came to grace this occasion. I also want to thank the Vice Chancellor, our principal, Professor Puleng Linka Bula. We want to thank you so much for welcoming us to UNISA. You always do it very well, and you never waste time with talking without recruiting and talking well about UNISA. That you do very well. We thank you for your leadership, and to that, Siti Hala, Lambokoto Hala, La. And I also want to thank the members of management, Mancom. Thank you, colleagues, for gracing this occasion, for being here with us the whole day. And I want to thank the mayors, the diplomatic call who were here for this whole day, having the patience. And I want to thank the audience, our students, for being here. I think now they had to rush because of transport. We are grateful that you came to fill this hall and you participated. It was not in vain. And I also want to thank our team of the panel members for their contribution, for demonstrating to us that UNISA has done it, because they are asking such relevant questions that we didn't even think of, that only the president could answer because he understands them. It shows that we have done it at UNISA. We really planted a seed, and I want to congratulate us as a university. And I also want to congratulate and thank Professor Fanny Kerk, our moderator. I cannot thank you enough for really facilitating this session. You did it very well. And I want to thank the Dean of the TM School. Prof, you did it very well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you. I want to thank the organizers, the people who made this venue to look so beautiful, to make it possible for us to be here and to enjoy being here. I really want to, multimedia teams, the cleaners, security, and everyone we appreciate. And also, please remember our open day tomorrow here at WINNIE MADIKIZELA Mandela from 10 to 14 hours. Please come and join us on the second floor of the building in the Senate Hall. Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
I think so absorbed by what the former president was saying that, you know, academics, sometimes you can't stay focused on the practical things. Anyway, my apologies for that. Again, to wish you a pleasant journey home. This time for real, you may leave. Can we all please stand so to allow the president to leave?